Jumaane Williams, he's a Democratic member of the New York City Council, and Jeremy Travis, president of the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, former director of National Institute of Justice, which is a research arm of the U.S. DOJ under President Clinton. And let me start with you because you were there.
Right.
What is your reaction to this debate about the status of the 1994 crime bill?
Well, just to remember what was going on in that moment with the president, he was being confronted by a protester on behalf of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I start in thinking about the importance, the power, and the authenticity of that protest directed against the 94 Crime Act. But I think the larger voice being articulated here is that our criminal justice policies have over decades been a source of injustice, particularly to the African American community. So I think we start by recognizing the validity of the Black Lives Matter sort of point of view. The 94 Crime Act, however, is not a major contributor to mass incarceration because it came long after we'd started our buildup of prisons, which started in 1972. So the 94 Crime Act really captures a mood in the country that had been in place for 20 years, where we had, through legislation, intentionally increased the number of people in prison. And the 94 Crime Act added to that, but it is not the source of mass incarceration.
Right, and you keep in mind federal prisoners are only 10% of the total, and mass incarceration had really peaked or had gone up a lot. It also, I think, fair to say, didn't cause the decline in crime,
right,
as far as we can tell. But what is key to me, Councilman, is this rhetoric, right? That protesters focus on the rhetoric, because you could look at the effects of the bill. You could also look about the politics that produced it, which I think is part of the frustration and the anger.
Well, you know, one of my hesitations, I haven't endorsed yet, not that my endorsement will make the difference, but it's important to me to really look at everything. And with the Clintons, there is a concern in totality. So not just the 94 crime bill, which I think, even if it didn't cause it, if the president is talking in this manner, particularly a president that was elected not to talk in this manner, from a democratic point of view, then that could free up states and other people to use this rhetoric and make policies. But also, whether it's the Welfare Act, whether it's cutting Pell, whether it's taking education out of the prison, we see a kind of package of where we're doing this, lock them up, tough on crime with a law enforcement point of view. And what we know, what we really needed was other services to these communities.
That, you know, it's interesting to say that. I'm just reading this. James Foreman, Yale, has a book that that will be coming out in a bit, and he sort of talks about this a little bit. You know, one of the things that people have talked about is, well, look, it wasn't just racist white people or Southern sort of post-Jim Crow politicians arguing for this. The majority of Congressional Black Caucus voted for the crime bill. You had black mayors, you had black clergy members saying we need more cops, we need more enforcement. What do you make of that?
I think that's a totally misleading observation, because what we had done as a country is to develop the notion that prison was the answer, and that everybody bought into that answer. What we needed, I think, as a council member said, was a much more sophisticated understanding that we actually have now, but we had in the embryonic stage then, that we can do a lot more to respond to crime than just prison. So the American politics had developed a sort of monochromatic view of crime, which is more prison is the answer. And in fact, when the crime bill was passed...
And not just more prison, we should say more punishment, to get tougher. Well, I mean, the language is very... It's not just, it's not technocratic. The language is very much like bring them...
Punitiveness in America.
Exactly right.
What we've supported, unfortunately, is tough on crime always meant more law enforcement and more jail, as opposed to figuring out what the problem is and serving those communities with resources. And it's unfortunate, I believe, that the president at that time, who many elected to change the conversation, not only bought into it, but helped lead it.
But let me ask you this. Because the context there, too, is you had a huge amount of crime. You know, I mean, really crazy. You know, set records. You know, you're looking at 2,400 homicides in New York City, in a city that last year had around 300. I mean, you're someone who represents folks in an area, and I imagine when crime goes up, or when there's a particularly bad crime in the area you represent, people are really freaked out about it. It's something people talk about at community meetings. It's something that there's outcry. It's front of mind for voters. Like, what would it mean for you as an elected representative if you saw crime spike like that?
Well, it's important. I actually represent one of the areas that have a lot of shootings in the cities. Unfortunately, what we've been trained, automatic responses, we need more police on the ground. We need more police. So you hear that in the community meetings, but they also know what it leads to.
Right.
And so,
do you hear that though? Do folks say we need?
Of course, yes, absolutely. But I know why they do that, because they're trained to do that. We have to do a different talk about what it means to be tough on crime, like universal youth employment that we're trying to get in New York City, which I think is more tough on crime than anything. But even so, police is to deal with an acute problem. The problem is now, if that's the only service you're sending, then you'll always say we need police.
Right.
What we need to do is figure out what's going on with the crime. And I have been attracted to Bernie Sanders because of the message that he's been sending, and I think that's why his message has been resonating so well.
Do you think we have turned the page enough now, Professor Travis, that we are at a point where we are expanding the range of options in which we talk about this?
Well, I think first we should recognize that there's a remarkable national consensus, left and right, Republican, Democrat, that we have too many people in prison. We have to end the era of mass incarceration. That's really important. We've quadrupled the rate of incarceration. Let's bring it way down. But I think we've also developed a much more sophisticated understanding of how to respond to crime in ways that aren't the sort of responses that we developed over the last 40 years.
And we'll see how that plays out in the general election, which is what I'm very curious about. We'll see if some of those really bad, ugly politics come back. Jumaane Williams, Jeremy Travis, this is a great conversation, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.